Hey everyone, welcome to tonight's episode of Teen Talk Live. I am your host, Ann Dillard, and I am just super excited to be back here with you. Again, this is our third season of Teen Talk Live, and we are continuing to bring you lots of information and tools that will transform minds and lives of teens and those who love them. So thank you for joining us. And please go ahead and share this video, share this link, let everybody know that we are on Teen Talk Live tonight with a really exciting topic. Now, September was dedicated to the mother-daughter relationship, and you all know that is what I love to talk about, or one of the things I really love to talk about. And so we spent all month talking about dissecting, building, strengthening the mother-daughter relationship. And so tonight I have two very special guests with me, and we're going to be talking about strengthening the mother-daughter relationship. So go ahead and share this out. Let people know we are on Teen Talk Live, and we're going to be talking about some good stuff. So help me welcome my first guest, who is Mary May. Mary, welcome to Teen Talk Live.
Thank you so much for having me, Miss Ann.
Absolutely, absolutely. So go ahead and tell our audience a little bit about who you are and how do you serve in the world?
Wow, how do I serve in the world? Now, that's a loaded question. But I am a couples and family therapist that I provide workshops, professional development around behavioral issues as well as trauma and dealing with violence in the community and understanding how that unfolds and impacts us in all aspects of our lives. So through kindergarten, through college life is one of the newest things that I've introduced. So domestic violence, bullying, and suicide prevention are my conversations of advocacy, but I believe it also influences our relationships as the core of the family being responsible. So both here as well as in the Eastern Caribbean and abroad, I have a relationship where I have the conversation is general and it is across the waters and everything like that. So therefore, my presence has been invited to come out and have this conversation that we're having this evening. So I look forward to contributing to our thing today.
Exciting. Thank you. Now, Eastern Caribbean, what part?
St. Lucia as well as St. Thomas for the
Oh,
past 6 years.
oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. I thank you. Thank you for doing the work that you do. And Francia, welcome to Teen Talk Live.
Thank you, Ann, for having me. We were just joking before we got started about, being here and being available to sit with you tonight, and I appreciate the opportunity to do so. And it's a pleasure meeting you as well, Mary.
Absolutely.
Awesome, awesome. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Francia, and how do you serve in the world?
Well, just a little bit about me. You asked me who I was to share that professional title, and I always get uncomfortable still when somebody says, "Well, what's your title?" Because I don't always introduce myself as that way. But typically, when you ask me who I am, I tell you that I'm a motivational Christian woman speaker, I'm an author, and I'm a licensed minister, as well as serving in the professional community as a psychology adjunct professor for the last decade, and in and out of corporate America as well. And so I am doing my best when I am out serving women. That's where my heart and my passion lies in helping as I grow as a woman, even at the young, tender age where I am, continuing to grow and helping other women. Stop laughing at me, Mary.
I love
that. But just still recognizing that even though I've reached this stage in my life, and so have you and I, and a lot of other women, we still have a long way to go in terms of how we take care of ourselves and the things that we pass on to those individuals around us, particularly our daughters.
Exactly. Particularly our daughters, and that's what have joined us together here tonight. So again, ladies, thank you so much for taking the stage with me. So as we start, you know what, before we came on, we started joking about you know having had you on, because okay, let me just back up a little bit. My scheduled guest had a family emergency, and so these two wonderful ladies were so kind enough to step in. And so we were joking about, as speakers, one of the first things we think about when we're invited to the stage is, how's my hair?
Yep.
How's my hair going?
Yes. Like, I hope it's all right. I'm still checking.
Right. How's my hair gonna
You look gorgeous. Cut it out.
But that's real talk, right? And so we're talking about the mother-daughter relationship. And where do we get that from?
Mm-hmm.
Where does that
Yep.
come from? I mean, did we pass that down? And did we pass it down to our daughters?
Right. I know my mother, without using the narrative because it wasn't what the words were at that time, about business branding. I think that she was teaching business branding all the way down from when I was in Pampers, like to the degree as a teenager, I would not take the trash out unless my face was beat. Like, it was to the extreme. My grandmother on my dad's side also contributed to the conversation because my grandfather never saw her without her hair and so forth, made up all of the years that they were together. So it was a core norm that presentation of how it is that you look and how you stand out in a situation is always important. And so I know that my mom is speaking all the time, like, okay, wait, don't do that hairstyle, do this hairstyle, not that lipstick, do this lipstick, not that dress, this dress, or this suit. Like, I know that her voice is constantly informing me on my decisions, even in my seasoned years.
Yes. I think that our mothers' voices are always following us. They're always following us. So Francia, tell me about, what were your thoughts when we were laughing about, is my hair straight? Can I get on this show?
But the first thing that popped in my mind, as we were all in agreement, was on, yes, my hair has to be right. Do I have any lipstick on? What does my face look like? And as Mary said, your mother's always in that background. My mother was a little bit later in years when I came along as a child, but there was never a time that she went outside of the house without her hair being properly done in some fashion or style. And certainly if it was for her more of a formalized occasion, specifically AKA church, she was not going to go out without any, as she called it, mouth stick, lipstick. And it had to be a particular color. It was not just any shade. There was that one shade that had to look right with her skin tone. And so I do find myself, looking at my daughter going, are you sure you're wearing that? Don't you want to put on some makeup today? What's going on? And I've not always presented myself in that way, but as I've continued to rebrand myself, Mary, and make sure that I am looking the part that I want people to see me at, I hear my mother in the background going, are you sure that's the right outfit for this occasion? And so it continues to play that role, and you continue to go, okay, well, would, subconsciously, even sometimes, would my mother approve? Am I presenting myself in the best possible light? Would she actually approve of not only what I look like, but what I'm about to say as well?
Right. And I think that's, there's so much value in that. I was a few years ago, I actually shaved my head and I was totally natural. And then as it was growing, I used that sponge to kind of, roll it up and get those little roll balls going. And every time I would look in the mirror, I would think, oh my gosh, if my grandmother would see me now going out the house like this, she would be like, girl, what is wrong with your hair? But certainly as we evolve and we become more secure in our culture, I know that we embrace more hairstyles.
Right.
Yes.
And in some ways, I found that to be really liberating, right? Because I went totally natural, and then sometimes I would just twist my hair and let it go. and feeling the confidence to embrace that and move in that space. And I know that's not the story or the narrative for everyone,
Right.
especially Black women in their hair. But for me, being able to walk in that space was so liberating for me.
My mother was always the one who said, a woman doesn't cut her hair off because that's her crown and glory. And like you, Anne, a few years ago, I went completely natural, and I, gradually did the big chop, as we say. And when she saw me in person the first time, she didn't say anything. It was only after she was on the phone having a conversation with someone and telling them that I was home that I hear her mention the fact that I had chopped all of my hair off, and she didn't know what was wrong with me. So even in her silence directly to me, I knew whether or not I had her approval. And in that instance, I did not. And so I realized I had to let it grow out a little bit for her to be happy with it again, to be sure that, because even as an adult, I'm still seeking mama's approval.
Right.
I wanted her to be happy and proud of what I looked like, because even then I was still being introduced as her baby, because I'm the youngest of four. So I didn't have a name. I was always introduced as her baby. So her baby has to look a certain way because that's who I am and that's who people expected me to look like.
Yeah. And so, and that's a really great point. So what happens when we get to the place where we're embracing our inner grown self, right?
Well,
And
believing that we embrace it.
or our daughters decide to embrace themselves, and it doesn't align with the values of the mother. What happens in that space?
It's a lot that happens in that space. I have to say that I'm a mother in a village. So I don't have any biological children, but I have a million daughters and a million sons, but I have a million daughters. But I would go with my girlfriend's daughters and use them as an example, that I always felt so protective around them in those emerging years, because I would feel like my girlfriends were about to like attack and kill, and like, who is this person that's in my house? And I'd be like, okay, listen, I'm respite. So if you ever need to call me, you ever need to come spend the night, whatever, I am the respite when it's getting really, really challenging. And I said, let's just go get some air or whatever. But it does impact, because it then becomes, you're always seeking that validation directly or indirectly. Not only, I mean, we're speaking of hair and kind of stepping into our own space, but that carries over into our decision making for every little thing. That little voice that we're talking about that pops up often. And sometimes it's not in agreement, because as I didn't intentionally evolve into natural hair, it happened with other, protective styles and so forth that I had done. And my mother, God rest her soul, I still feel like she is approving or disapproving, and my brother continues that narrative to kind of say, okay, who is this? Mary Frances wouldn't approve of da 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 da. And I'm like, okay, but why? Why am I still trying to get her voice of approval? So it's a blessing and a curse, and I think it's how it is that you end up saying, okay, I'm standing in my space. You asked me to be independent, autonomous, confident, have self-esteem, be encouraging. So if that's what you have, asked me in 2019, this is what I present to you, and let's have a conversation, about that. Like, if she was still on this side of the soil, we probably would have many debates and conversations, because I was always that little girl, because I'm also the baby of the family, and I always was the one pushing the envelope of doing something on the radical side, but still I was that little girl.
Yeah, I think it gets really dicey in there because we do, in some instances we do seek that approval. We do want mother to be proud of us and to be pleased in how we're growing. And yet, as we become more autonomous, as we explore, as we travel more, as we seek higher education and those things, we kind of evolve into our own person, and it's not always pleasing. So
Right.
yeah, I could see those conversations. And there are times as a mom, my daughter is 30 now, and as a mom, there are times when I just have to be like, okay, she's all of 30. And I hope that some of the values that we've taught her, she'll hold on to, but also having gone to grad school, having been a licensed therapist, I've had the privilege to understand some things differently, that she has to, be her own person, be her own woman, but there are parts of her that I know she'll still hear my voice.
Mhm.
But I'm hoping that my voice will be a voice of reasoning and not one that out quiets her voice.
Or
You
you mean
know?
like critical?
Yeah, because sometimes some like, okay, so when I was growing up in my household, it was like children are seen and not heard.
Right.
And I
Absolutely.
carried over some of those things into my household, right? When I'm raising my children. It's like, okay, no, I'm the, you just be quiet until I ask you, or something like that.
Right.
And that, I mean, now I would do that differently. But what I'm hoping is that that hasn't silenced her to the point where she won't explore her own, and say, well, maybe mom won't like this, but you know what? I feel like this is really enhancing to me, or this is something that I really want to do. Because sometimes if if our independent children aren't able to operate in that space, we get a lot of backlash, which leads to what? Disconnection. It leads to depression. It leads to those kinds of anxiety and things like that. What do you say about that, Francia?
I can tell when you mentioned, it was children are seen and not heard. That was kind of again the type of household that I grew up in because my mother was born in the late 1920s. So when you think about how she was raised,
Yeah.
those things just simply got passed down. The adults were at the dinner table first, and then the children were served, and that kind of thing. Do
Mhm.
as I say, do as I say, not as I do was always the message that was there.
Mhm.
And one of the things that really stuck out for me, and I think became a true turning point for how I hoped I would be as a parent or as a mother. I remember writing my mother a letter, and I think it had to do with the boy, believe it or not. And I was so fearful of what she would say because I wanted to have this discussion because we didn't have those kinds of discussions that I thought somehow if I put it in a letter, it would go over better. Well, let me just say it did not go over well that way either. And she actually had a few choice words, not for the content, but the idea that I wrote her a letter to discuss this issue. And so when I began to have my own children, and my oldest daughter is 32 and the youngest is 18, one of the things that I promised myself was I would never cut off that communication. I
Mhm.
would allow them that platform to talk about and ask me whatever it was that they needed to ask me without judgment, without me coming across as condemning them for their thoughts and their feelings. And most days, I think I did an okay job. I will admit that it was not always an easy thing to do. And even today, with my youngest, she's a freshman in college this year, and some days, I just want to grab her and shake her, but I know I can't do that. because she is coming into her own young woman. And even
Right.
though she calls, people call her my mini me because she is such a reflection of who I am as a person. I know that we're now at that, like all of us do, we're now at that critical turning point where she's entering a new chapter of her life and she's got to find her own voice. And she has one, but it still sounds like mom. And so now it's about me, it's about pushing back and letting it go so that she can have her own voice and stand on her own. And it's painful sometimes to see it. And then some days, she never knows that I'm smiling, I'm jumping, and I'm doing cartwheels because I'm so proud of the young woman that she's becoming.
Right, right. And it's like, that emancipation
Yes.
that happens. And you want to hold on because of, a lot of times because of fear. You want to hold on, but also it's a joy to see them emancipated.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yes.
I don't think I ever really was given that ability, until I actually got out of my mother's home and, was truly out on my own. I don't think I was ever afforded the ability to say, you know what, I am my own person. It did not come until much later. And no offense to her, because again, with the education that we all have and in our professional lives, our perception of how we see things and decisions we make, it's vastly different, a lot of it from what our parents did, especially our mothers. And maybe I'm wrong in that regard, but I think because of that it opens up this totally different conversation about how do I raise my daughter today versus what my mother did way back when.
Right. And I always say, with conversations like these, it's not to say that your mother did such a bad job.
Absolutely not.
Right.
No.
Because there are things that they absolutely did, or we absolutely did, that were great. The thing is, as we grow and we evolve and we learn more, we realize that there is more that we probably needed, and there's more that could be done.
Absolutely.
And so it's about reconciling those two realities.
Right.
Right. So let me just pause for a second. I'm so into this conversation, and I haven't paused to welcome our guests. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining this conversation with us. And Chrissy said, sometimes when we have those revelations, we should have that conversation with our children. I think it's liberating for the child, and the mother. And Chrissy, you are so right. When we do get those revelations, I think it is helpful, as we're talking about building and strengthening the mother-daughter bond. I think it is helpful to have those conversations. Like, I didn't do it all right, or I made a mistake here, or I think you should what is your opinion about this? Sometimes we were like, if I want your opinion, I give it to you. Right. Which is, it's not very liberating, but knowing better and engaging our children in conversations like that, our daughters, and saying, what is your opinion about this? And it's okay that you have your opinion. And guess what? It's okay if if it's not my opinion as well.
True that. As you were just speaking, I was just thinking about the reverse. From a young person's voice, I generally support them in just creating safely how to enter into, that type of conversation and getting that approval from their parents, but then also being autonomous to be independent. And it's usually a very delicate walk because, I might say, okay, write a letter, but then it's more so write the letter to kind of organize what it is that you want to say, and asking maybe permission, mom, can we go out and have tea or something, or, have it in a general space where, hopefully she won't get so upset or unwound, and, be able to receive the energy that's being presented forth, because it can't be presented as if you're challenging their authority, but that you're just inquiring
Right.
around, okay, well, this is something new that's been introduced to me. This is how I would handle it, but I want to get your guidance from it.
I think that's really important because I have clients now who are in their 30s, 40s, and 50s who are afraid to initiate that conversation with their moms.
Exactly.
And so I think that is so liberating to give them permission to do that, and to also be so secure in who we are as parents that when we are broached to have this conversation, it doesn't feel threatening to our own identity.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Yeah. So Francia, let me branch out a little bit. So growing up in the church, there's a certain kind of way that you had to present yourself as a daughter, right? Especially if your mom was in leadership.
Oh gosh. And if there's anything about her that it's now me, it's being in leadership in the church. It was funny, kind of comical now that I look back on it. The situation was not such, but a few years ago when my father passed away, my current pastor here in Texas and my home pastor in Louisiana both attended his homegoing services. And there was a conversation between those two men that I knew nothing about, as we were proceeding into the church. Upon my return to back home to Texas, where I currently live, my pastor, he says, "So you did XYZ when you were growing up?" And I'm like, "Wait a minute, how did you find that out?" And of course, he shared with me the conversation that he had had. And a lot of it was because of my mother. We were the children who, not just myself, but all of my siblings. My mother was over the music ministry for a number of years. She was in the culinary ministry for a number of years. I mean, she's an Eastern Star and all of these other things that came along with how she defined herself. Mm-hmm. And a lot of what I currently do, especially even in this platform in speaking, comes at a comfortable level for me because my mother pushed me to be in those roles.
Absolutely.
You see, Mary's like, yes.
Absolutely.
It was, you will do the Easter play, and this is the part that you have. There was no discussion about it. You
right?
did what she said do. You will present the pastor with his gift on the pastor's anniversary. Here's your speech. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't, you're not going to be up there with your head hung down. You're going to stand up straight. You're going to speak loudly and clearly and slowly so that people understand. And so growing up in that atmosphere, and it wasn't just her, it was all of the women in the church. They set the standard for us as young ladies, as young men, as we were growing up across the years, that I know all of us still hold today. Yes, did we stray? Of course we did. But we found our way back to those positive influences. Mm-hmm. And, whether it's on social media or in face-to-face where I see people, from back home, all of those things that we learned in the church are still with us. And I think many of us are still using them in the church, but we're using them outside of the church as well. Mm-hmm. And we're benefiting from that. Yes.
And I do believe that the church has groomed us for so many different things. You learned how to hold a mic.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Right? You learned how to dress and present yourself in public. And it was no shying away. And I remember even making sure that my kids had parts in the Easter play and the Christmas play, but I was a little extra, so they had to have long parts.
Okay, are you sure you're not related to my mother?
Right. But that's just a little bit more to love of your creativity.
It's something because, when I think about that, that was tied directly to my own identity as well, because when I was a little girl growing up with my grandmother, I loved when I was presenting on stage, and back in those days, the people would come up and they'll give you money and they would say, encore, encore, encore. Oh, wow. And they would want you to say it again if you did so well. And so I wanted, now that I'm thinking more about it, my children were kind of like pushed to do that. But like you said, it wasn't just your mother, it was the environment that they were in.
Entire village.
Yes.
Exactly. And now I think all three of them, they don't have a problem speaking in public.
Mm-hmm.
And and because they were groomed to do that through the church.
Well, see, now it's funny that you say that now, Anne, and now you have me thinking about, my three. My oldest daughter doesn't have that, that fear or that standoffish about speaking very openly and clearly. But the younger two, they would rather not. They'll do it, but they would rather not take the spotlight, so to speak, in terms of speaking. And even with my youngest daughter, for her to really use her voice, it's got to be either it comes from a place of what she's passionate about, what she cares about, or something that has hurt or angered her. So for her, she hasn't learned that balance just yet. To know that I can speak, from a place of comfort, of relaxation, and not be angry, not be hurt, or not be afraid. That's when she feels like she has to speak out. So I I don't know how. I don't know necessarily that that's been a part of me, and perhaps it has been, and maybe I just didn't realize it. I don't know.
Well, hey, something to explore, right?
Absolutely.
Always learning and growing. So Mary, tell me, for mothers who are watching this, and I think Chrissy's still watching, she's a mom. Her daughter is in, I think, her second year of college as well. And we have other moms who will be joining us on the replay. Now, when we think about building and bridging and strengthening the mother-daughter relationship, you have played a really critical part in that by being the advocate. You're like, I don't have any children, I don't have any daughters, but I'll be that respite for you. And Lord knows there were times when I could have used a respite.
Absolutely. Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Right. And that person in the village, and sometimes on the outside, you can see so much and you can call so much out of that girl, that daughter. What are some of the tools that we can use as mothers, or we can encourage mothers who are watching to use to build that bridge and to fill that gap? Because I mean, there's a shortage of respites in our village these days.
There is such a shortage. And I think the shortage comes from the way that our communities and families have shifted from it being a shared parenting, shared collaborative, and being okay with people having a voice in something that, you feel like is all yours, or all that you have. If you're making that cake, you made that entire cake. You didn't want anybody else's sugar or anybody else's butter or any of, the sprinkles and all of the stuff that goes into it. You wanted to have complete responsibility and control over how that cake was going.
Yes.
And I'm a metaphor person, so forgive me. I like to make things plain so that we can kind of see it and own into it a little bit more. So I think that in building the trust, that parents have to know that they have planted the seeds in the different experiences that they've exposed their children to, be it positive or maybe not so positive, but it's going to build their character. That when their children find it comfortable to approach them, that they take the I out of the process. Because as they take the I out of the process, then they're able to clean their lens to say, okay, I can see this young person in everything that I have molded them to be. And then they've embraced some new ingredients that, life has informed them of through their experience. So if I can take the I out and not have to feel that I have to control it, but to allow the child, the young person to now gain control, it helps them in such a greater instance that decreases the anxiety or the fear of them being able to approach a situation that's difficult for them to identify and or resolve, that will, spread across various parts of their relationships as well as in workspaces. So just eliminating that I and trusting and knowing that even if it's right or wrong, weak or strong, that the core of everything that I have planted within my child, they're going to know how to deliver it. But I have to take the I out, because it wouldn't be how I would do it. It would be how they take what I've poured into them and how I've made them that wonderful, delicious cake. And now they're going to, take that slice out and make sure that they plant their seeds and their, growth, how it is that they feel best. And I will just be in the background as the parent. You're always the advocate, you're always the supporter. Figure out what's the safest way that you can have these conversations as the person, as your young child evolves in their different spaces, because they may peek their nose or step their toes into a situation and say, okay, I think I want to try out public speaking. And then they say, okay, yeah, I don't want to go there anymore. The encouraging thing is not to just say, okay, well, good, because I ain't feel like driving you anyway. It was inconvenient, I had to go through so much to arrange it. It's more so, okay, tell me what the experience is when you go that's making you uncomfortable to return. And how do you anticipate that you'll never encounter this type of feeling again in life? So let's kind of peel back the layers, and again, as the parent, take the I out. And if you feel like the I has to be in, then find a supportive professional like any of us, or people who are like us, that will help you be able to see that, yes, your children are living the life that you have created for them, but they're adding their own sauce to it as well, and embracing what their sauce is, again, right or wrong, weak or strong. They're going to grow to evolve into the individual that will resemble what you want it to be, but is going to be in a new generation, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. All this talk of cake and sauce and everything, make.
I'm sorry. I should have told you that in the thing that I'm a person of metaphors, because I like making it plain.
I could taste it. I could taste it. Yes, and it makes sense, because again, when we Chrissy, we're talking about how to support that child or that young person, your daughter, to in a environment where it can be sometimes conflictual. But the thing about it is, taking the I out of it, that resonates with me, because a lot of times if my daughter doesn't do what I say or what I believe, I take it personal.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
okay, can I raise my hand in agreement upon that one?
Yes.
What do you say? Both hands. Both hands.
I take it personal, and
Yes.
I feel like she's trying to do something to buck against me,
or be defiant,
or be
Right.
defiant, rude,
Right.
or disrespectful. All of those things. And I love what you say about take the I out of it, because you know what? Maybe it's just not about me.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Maybe she's just developing, and she's taking what I've taught her, and she's mixing her own experiences into it, and she's gonna have a different cake.
Right.
Okay, mine doesn't like cake. So I think we have to dig out the ice cream to go with the cake. And the ice cream for me is being able to, as you said, Mary, take the I out. And I love that, because that's where I am right now as a mother of one that just graduated high school and venturing into college. And I'm taking the I out, and I'm serving up the ice cream, because the ice cream for her is not, well, Mama, what do I do? It's now I'm asking her 20 questions about what she thinks the right step is. Mm-hmm. And that's a hard place for me to be in, because I'm so accustomed to, she's my baby, protecting her, being in that mama bear mentality of saying, I've got to protect her, of saying, no, it's time for me to let this go. And it's been a process. And so now when she comes home and says, well, Mom, I'm really struggling here, and and I don't know what to do. And I see the meltdown that I'm used to seeing happen. I'm like, okay, well, what do you want me to do? And a couple of times it's caught her off guard because I didn't immediately come back with a resolution.
Yes.
It's been like, okay, so what's the problem? What do you want me to do? I'm confused. Why are you telling me this? How can I help you work through this more so than, okay, well, here's what you need to do.
Right. Because
because I'm trying to fix it.
Right.
It naturally, because you're a parent, you feel driven that, okay, they're bringing this to me so that I can fix it.
Right.
It's almost like that listening versus hearing thing. You just need to be available to listen and help them problem solve and walk them through the different steps. And have you considered, this aspect, or have you considered if you go this idea? Because especially for emerging teenagers, you want it to be their idea. You want them to still feel like that they have strength in what it is that they're presenting to you, and that it's okay. So even if you're kind of strong arming the ice cream or the cake or the sprinkles, you still put it into an open-ended presentation, where they feel like, okay, I'm being validated, you hear me, you're allowing me to make those decisions. And that's such a powerful instrumental gateway, because again, when they're in that conference room, pitching whatever their business idea is, or whatever their project is going to be, those same skills are going to be utilized. And we shouldn't, again, in the we can use that as an example and probably say that, but we probably shouldn't say it all the time, because then it's like beating, a dead issue, or, trying to tell them something that they can't see, because they can't see the conference room and they can't see that, but they can see right now that you are validating and hearing what it is that's important to them, and giving them like different streets of avenues of how it is that's going to best fit. And then maybe say, okay, well, I've given you, we've discussed a couple options. Again, the I is out. We've discussed a couple options. Why don't you take those things and revamp them, and maybe come back and we could talk in like an hour, or we can talk, if it's Wednesday, let's talk on Friday to see what you came up with, because then that gives them time to build those critical thinking skills and decision, ability to just problem solve, and to know how to do it with your support, but individually. So it's like with your support, because they're coming back to you, they presented it to you, they know that you are going to check in with them or whatever, but then also they have some time alone that they can kind of map out however they need to map it out, to then come back with a second version, or another draft, or even a final draft.
I think that's so key. I everything that was said, I think it's really key. What I do believe is true is that as mothers, as women, and Chrissy says great advice. Wonderful. As mothers, right? As women, we have to have some level of security and self-esteem about ourselves to be able to allow our daughters to matriculate like that.
Right.
Absolutely. And so, and Francia, I want you to speak to this. I find that it's really critical that I have a supporting cast. I have other women that if I'm having issues with my feelings or my self-esteem, I can go to them and work it out with them, and they can build me up. Tell me about the importance of having, as mothers, having women in our circles to build us up, so we're not transferring that emotional dependency on our daughters.
Okay, are you really trying to turn this into a counseling session today? Because we're almost...
She all in your living room making this.
All in my living room on the Chase Lounge with her feet kicked back, everything, right? It's funny you say that, Anne, because it probably was just earlier this summer that I realized I was not doing a good job of that for myself. And I say that because in building the business, in working in and out of corporate America, in continuing to define who I am as a person, as a woman, I had kind of built up some walls around myself. And I realized earlier this summer that in doing so, I kind of didn't have that group of women to help build me up when the world was beating down on me. And I had to correct that. And you're right, I had to step back and go, wait a minute. What does that say to my daughter?
Right.
What has that said to her? Because she knows. I mean, when I would jokingly say my phone would ring and I would jokingly go, oh my gosh, who is this? I don't recognize this number. And she would say, your friend. And I'm like, I don't have any friends. And so I would jokingly say that, but then it became true in somewhat of a sense on a certain level. And the circle has always been small, and that small circle has been people or the women, other mothers who have seen the positive in me and have tried to remind me of such.
Yes.
But at the same time, I'm the one saying, no, that's not me. I'm not good enough. I haven't done this. I haven't done that. I can do better. Well, I could have done better. Why didn't I do this? Why didn't I? All of those things that we say internally that beats up on our self-esteem. And so in a way, I know that I've transferred some of that onto her, not intentionally, but it's been by behavior. It's been, those behavioral traits that we all know that we'll pass on, those nonverbal messages that we all pass on to people. And so for me, that's why I said, are you trying to turn this into a counseling session? So I'm at that point growing, continue to grow and prosper internally as a woman to say, wait, I deliberately did this. Now, how do I go back and fix it? And I hope she's getting that lesson. Yes, I made the decision to do X, Y, Z, but now I realize it may not have been the best decision, or maybe it was for the time, but now how do I transition over to something else?
Yes.
And I think in doing so, she's now seeing this awesome, bold group of women stand behind me and say, Francia, what took you so long? Because they saw it all along. It was just me. And those that same handful of women are now standing behind her and supporting her. So now these women who are, old enough to be her mother, she's calling them her friends as well, because they are standing behind her and they're standing with me as her mother to make sure that we get her every possible tool that we can so that she's the successful person she wants to be.
Wow. And I love that. I totally believe in that community. And Francia, some of us are just late bloomers.
I didn't say I was a late bloomer. I said I made some decisions. Now that's a different conversation, right, Mary?
It is a different conversation. We gotta know our buzzwords too. Like when people say certain things, it just take us into a different space. Like, wait a minute now, I ain't signed up for this.
Absolutely.
I'm part of this.
Absolutely. And I think it's important. And I think this is what Chrissy said earlier, when we come to these stages and we realize that this is what's happening, that we're able to have those conversations with our daughters.
Yes.
And just like you said, hey, I might not have done this right, but here are, here's some examples right here, and we're making it right. And it's important as women that we come together and support each other and call out those things in our friends, in our women friends, and things that you can see that they can't see, and remind them, because if not, it's hard, it's difficult when the mother depends on the daughter for that emotional security.
Yes.
Because I think in some sense it could potentially stifle her growth.
Definitely.
We have to, and the more secure we are in ourselves, in who God has created us to be, the more we know about who we are and what our power is. I think that's the more we are able to liberate our daughters to walk in their authentic selves.
I agree. Most
Absolutely.
definitely.
Because we have our universal assignment, and it's like, just seeking and following and knowing that where we are today, we were already assigned this day before we knew it to happen. So it's like, do we operate and follow in our assignment, or do we refuse our assignment, also refuse the blessing that comes with that? And that's another just transitional space in which is a growth moment, because you may not really recognize what the assignment has been given to you from the universe, but once you do, all of the opportunities will avail themselves.
And do we recognize that our daughters have their own assignments?
Exactly.
And
That's
they're not
Right.
here necessarily to fulfill our assignments.
right. And that's the reason why we got to take eye out of it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, ladies, we're coming to the top of the hour. And for the moms who are watching, what's one another piece of advice that you can give to those moms to say, hey, this is another way that you can help to strengthen that your mother-daughter relationship? I'll start with Francia.
For me, I think if it's that one piece that no matter what we're going through that has consistently helped us keep the bond strong has been communication. Through the good, the bad, the ugly, through, the ups and the downs, but to just keep the lines of communication open. It's one thing to talk to someone, but when you're really communicating and, and you're employing those listening skills and you're being empathetic and you're sharing, your experiences with things, I believe it truly makes a difference in how our daughters see us as mothers and as a person, as well as how they begin to see themselves. So just recognize when your daughter needs you to communicate with her and not just talk to her. And I think that there is a huge difference in what those two things look like. And if you can get those two, down packed for the two of you, because that looks different for every mother-daughter situation.
Absolutely.
If you can get that working for the two of you, I think you'll have a relationship where both of you will be blessed beyond measure in succeeding with that and carrying it forward to grandchildren and other children and her children and grandchildren and so on and so forth.
Awesome. Excellent advice. Thank you. So, Mary, what would you say to the mothers about one more thing to help strengthen that mother-daughter bond?
I would say forgiveness and trust. To forgive for anything that they feel that they could have done differently, and not feeling, burdened that every single interaction is a space of trying to prove what that forgiveness needs to be, but just have authentic conversations of doing that and trusting that over time we will evolve into creating this new stage of our relationship, because every 5 years, sometimes less, but every 5 years we evolve into a different stage of what our relationship, what our role is, what we have permission to talk about, and just being ready to evolve in that space, even if it's uncomfortable. And if it's too uncomfortable, again, seek out the various resources that are available in society so that you can just kind of embrace that developmental milestone for you, because it will be powerful for the relationship and the legacy of your family overall.
I think that's excellent advice. And I would just add to that, owning your own stuff. Own your stuff without blaming or deflecting, because everybody have their own individual experience.
Yes.
You all might have gone through the same thing, but you experience it differently. So owning your stuff, and that will lead to that forgiveness and building that trust. And I think that's so amazing, because we have to give measures of grace on both sides.
On both sides.
Both sides. We have to give measures of grace, because you know what? It's not a perfect walk. This is not a perfect walk, and we're always learning and growing, and hopefully getting better. But I think this has been a really instrumental conversation. I think it's a conversation that needs to be had in more spaces, because the mother-daughter relationship is so critical, and I think it's the blueprint for all relationships. I really, really do.
I really
And
do.
so it has been great having you all here. So let's go around again. Mary, tell people how they can find you, and then we'll go to Francia, tell people how they can find you, and then we'll close.
So I can be found on Facebook or on my website at Butterfly Love Consultations, as well as on Relationship Flow on Instagram. Open to evolving with you through professional development, conversations like this, and more.
Awesome. All right, Francia.
And likewise, you can find me on particularly Facebook and Instagram, simply as Francia Noble, or through my website, which is simply my name, francianoble.com.
Excellent. Thank you again, ladies, for saying yes to this conversation. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much for joining us, whether you caught us live or on the replay. Remember to share this out, because we are healing mother-daughter relationships, one relationship at a time. Again, my name is Ann Dillard. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. You can also check me out on Facebook in our mother-daughter group at Building Authentic Mother-Daughter Relationships on Facebook. Or another thing I want to point out, you can have mother-daughter relationship conversation cards, and I'll drop the link in the comment section to help you have these conversations with your mother or with your daughter. It's been great being here with you another evening on Teen Talk Live. Join us next week. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.